Hello, hi, and welcome. I'm Naloufar Hidayat, and this is a very special broadcast of our show, Dear World Live, in conjunction with our friends and colleagues at the United Nations to celebrate the UN 75 Youth Plenary. I am so glad to have you all on here with me. Dear World Live is our weekly offering to you from Doha Debates. Each week, we tackle a very big global challenge and we find fantastic people to talk about the solutions that we can all take with us as we go forward. Now, as I said, this is a very special episode, and I'll be joined by three amazing young changemakers in a moment, and we will be searching for the solutions to the question, how the world is responding to the coronavirus pandemic. Is it doing well enough? Is the world doing well enough in its response to the coronavirus pandemic? I'll be talking to them about how the COVID pandemic has impacted their work and activism, myself. But before we hear from them, I'd like to go through some of the things that have changed and some of the ways we've all been affected. I want to give you all a bit more context about what the global impact of the pandemic has been and how the international community has responded. In 2020, it's been an absolutely dominated year by the coronavirus pandemic. Globally, there have been more than 27 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 since the pandemic began in Wuhan, China in December of 2019. To date, there have been almost 900,000 deaths. The world that we live in is changing dramatically as the pandemic spreads. Suddenly, there are no airplanes in the sky. Students around the world took their classes online and in their homes if they could, and economies have suffered. To cope with such an unprecedented event, a huge response by the international community was necessary. Scientists and laboratories around the world started to search for a vaccine. As it stands, we have 34 candidate vaccines in clinical evaluation and many more in early stages of trial. In March 2020, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres launched a $2 billion humanitarian response plan to fight COVID-19 in some of the world's most vulnerable countries. In a bid to protect millions of people, best efforts were made. Guterres also called for an immediate global ceasefire in all the corners of the earth, and thankfully 170 countries stood in solidarity with the United Nations, endorsing the call to silence guns and stand united against the global threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, throughout today's Dear World Live show, we'll be reflecting on this international response, and we'll consider what the decisions and discussions that have been had around it are like, and what the leaders' responses have to say about how we are dealing with the crisis. But also, more importantly, how is society at large dealing with it? Have our existing systems stood up to the challenges of the global pandemic? As ever with Dear World Live, brought to you by Doha Debates, we want to hear from you. Your thoughts, suggestions, comments, and questions are always welcome and valued. Send us your comments that you have to wherever you're watching, wherever you are seeing the comment bar, just drop us a little line. Try and use the hashtag Dear World Live if you're watching us on Twitter. We'll be able to find your comments much easier. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce today's panel. Today, we have Paloma Costa Oliveira. She is a climate activist from Brazil working with the youth-led organization Engajamundo. She's also part of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change. Joining us from South Africa is Obikeng Lesayani, an education activist and youth activist. He's working to bring about better access to quality education and engagement programs. And from Luxembourg, we're joined by Felix Feider, and he's working with regional and national groups to empower young people from underrepresented regions to participate in environmental decision-making processes. Thank you all for joining. How are you?
Fine,
thank you.
That's how I gave the internet connection for everyone. So now I know that we have a bit of a delay. We're going to work with it. Thank you all for joining. We have all the continents represented there, well, 3 of them at least, which is brilliant. I'd like to kick things off straight away. Paloma, coming to you. I want to know, what has been your experience of the realities on the ground with those statistics that I mentioned about the pandemic, the fact that really the world has had to stop?
Yes, Well, I come from a region where the response was not even close to enough. And first, to see what was happening here on the ground, it really makes me really sad because I had to see how society in general was still filled with ego and individuality. And this is, for me, is like a remaining thought of a failed system, which which somehow had to colonize our thoughts and take off our sense of surviving. But as the time passed, somehow I started seeing like a good response from, at least from the society, you see, like thinking better how they can connect, how they can engage
That's
better.
interesting, Paloma. So actually, you're noticing that in the vacuum that the pandemic has created, new little shoots of cooperation and insight are popping up. I'm interested in that. I want to bring in Felix, if I might. How has it impacted your activism? I imagine a lot of it is having to go online.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it basically all was moved online. We had just when this all started, I think was when we were getting close to the World Environment Day as well, and there were so many activities planned for this all around the world, and especially in Colombia, the hosting country, and all of this had to be moved online. So it was a very abrupt change. Although I feel like, at least from my experience, we managed moving it online really well. And the big positive aspect of this, even though it always feels strange to say positive aspect of this terrible situation, but the one positive aspect is I feel like more youth have been able to actually get involved in the projects that we're doing. We were able to reach more people because everything was moved online. So these restrictions, the social restrictions for people to participate in meetings and events weren't there as much anymore.
Yes, and in fact, we're doing so much more to reduce the world carbon footprint. If you can imagine what it's like to organize these big events, it's really interesting to see how amazing it's been to come together like this. Obi King, my friend and colleague, I'd like to come to you next. Now, you were on one of our Doha debate shows last year, and I was very glad to have you. But I want to know, I was met with such enthusiasm, such vigor, and so many plans that you had for what 2020 was going to bring. Has the pandemic affected your efficacy?
I think when you really think about it, every single country, or like almost every single society, has a very different class of people. So
Yes.
depending on who like you speak to, you're like most likely gonna get a different response. So example, if you if you're speaking about just the privilege of just being able to move something online in South Africa, we have one of the most internet data expensive countries in the world. It's just super hard to just access the like internet, and even harder, most people don't have the like type of devices that can allow you to easily move something online. But I think really like at the crux of it, the pandemic has like showed a lot of South Africans that a lot of the problems we have are deeply political. It's
Wow.
problems that you really cannot run. It's like problems that you really can't fix unless you have a working government. Like
Wow.
like you have like people that haven't had access to water, and now you're saying to someone, go wash your hands, because the pandemic easily transfers through maybe hands or like anything of that nature. And then someone says,
Yeah.
I just don't have water. Government promised them that they're going to deliver on that, and the
See,
pandemic has showed us that they haven't.
This is what's so interesting to me, to have you wonderful people. Paloma, you were kind of talking about the hope that you have coming ahead. But all of this is dependent on where we are in the world. Luxembourg, Italy, from where I am broadcasting, I think we're going to be fine. Places in Central and South America, South Africa, and the African continent, there's going to be more trouble. I want to understand more from you guys. But first, we at Doha Debates have gathered some responses from our wonderful friends from around the world. We have asked the question, do you trust global institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, and NATO to solve the world's biggest problems? And this is what they had to say.
Although I believe there is room for error in any organization, humanitarian organizations, I believe, are more likely to use de-escalation and humane tactics to diffuse conflict. as opposed to the self-interest of individual governments?
Yes, I do trust this global institution can solve the world's biggest problems, but I do question the independency of these global institutions when it comes to decision making.
I really don't, because I think that these institutions are heavily influenced by the politics that's going around in the world.
However imperfect these institutions could be, I think their advantages of their existence outweighs the disadvantages.
That is some interesting perspectives from all over the world. So if you're just joining us now, thank you. This is a very special episode of Dear World Live, brought to you by Doha Debates. We have partnered with our friends and colleagues at the United Nations to celebrate the UN 75 Youth Plenary. Joining me today is Paloma Costa Oliveira. She's a young climate change activist from Brazil. Obikeng Lesayani is in South Africa, and he's an advocate for education and is a political fellow and youth activist. Felix Feider is there he is. Thank you, Felix. Is a conservationist and environmental activist from Luxembourg. Now, I've been talking to you guys. I want you guys to talk to each other. This is the very special part of the show where we engage our global audience in with the wonderful experts and panelists we have on. I'm going to wait for my producer to put in some of the questions that we've been asked from our audience, both at the UN and wherever you're watching Dear World Live right now. So if my producer's watching, please do put those in when you have them. But let's crack on with the show from you guys. What do you make of this idea that Obikeng brought up, which I think is fascinating, that different countries have different access to wealth, have different packages that they can give to their respective citizens, and therefore different outcomes? Who agrees and who disagrees?
I completely agree.
Let's go with
Paloma. Do you want to go first,
Paloma? We'll come straight to you. Paloma, you go first.
Okay, yes, I completely agree when Obikeng brought the reality on having access to water. I was remembering what happened to the indigenous here. They brought their complaining because right now here they are doing self-isolation, and they brought their complaint on what they needed to be protected as they are more vulnerable to infectious disease. And it had a veto on that, saying that they don't need access to water. And it's what Obikeng said, like, how can you not give access to water that is treated, and at the same time you say you have to wash your hands? And you say that these are the vulnerable groups that need the attention, that need to be taken care of. The Supreme Court had to have a vote on that and give like 30 days.
So that's what's happening in Brazil. Felix, let me come to you. Obviously, you live in a developed world country, and you have different access. How do you feel when you hear your colleagues who are trying to make changes, trying to make sure that young people's voices are heard, struggling with such basic access?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, it's for somebody from Luxembourg, from Western Europe, it's insane to just think about, something that we see as so completely normal, and like turning on the tap and you get water and you can wash your hands. It's something completely normal. To just put yourself into the situation where you don't have that anymore, it's unthinkable for many people here. But I also think even within Europe and within the developed world, within countries, you have so many such a big difference in environmental justice as well. I mean, because actually at the moment I'm calling from London, and there as well, in cities where you have air pollution, it's often the people that have the least that live in areas with the highest air pollution, and then because of that are then also more easily affected by this deadly disease. So yeah, there's inequality between countries and within countries.
And please feel free to engage with each other, guys. It's important that the three of you connect with each other. Obikeng, what do you make of that? Do you think that the burden then should rest on the shoulders, the broader shoulders? Should nations who have bigger wealth, bigger income, be doing more to make sure that enough is going on? How should the UN be responding to the different needs?
I was thinking actually about to make an example to Felix, that if you look at Palermo and I's internet connection is quite terrible compared to his. just like something as basic as that we are like, I mean, we're like even lucky to just be able to just have this conversation. But I just think that the crux of it is you do have governments that can apply for a bunch of different funding from like different multinationals and so forth. The problem always comes to like managing it. And like I'm going to make a very simple example using South Africa. We set aside about 500 billion rand to be able to respond properly to COVID. But most of that money has just not been managed well. So then you ask yourself that, yes, there are some countries that don't have the like type of resources that they would need. And then when they do get them, how well can they manage them? And then how well do like thing? And then how well do like even citizens trust that their like representatives can like manage and like do something as basic as delivering a water tank so that someone can be able to like watch to sort of wash their water. And then I just wanted to like bring another point of access. I mean, trusting the type of information that we have access to.
That's interesting.
That I'm like, if like my president came to me and then said, you know, we have these amounts of cases, I will probably always over like exaggerate them, because previously I am aware that we just don't have access to proper information compared to maybe the like sort of like Western world, where you can trust if like an institution comes and says, these are the amounts of deaths that we have occurred, these are the amounts of cases at play.
So then how important are institutions like the United Nations? We've mentioned NATO at the youth plenary, and we've also mentioned the World Bank. How, at times when fake news and irregularities are rife, I want to know how you guys make sure that the most important messages from your activism rings true and you are able to communicate those to the change makers and the policy makers. Paloma, let's come to you first.
Well, when we think about like recognizing institutions, they make like a strong part on bringing information that people rely on that. So for example, here in Brazil, we are working with the cases among indigenous communities and quilombolas communities, reminiscently of Black people here in Brazil. And for their cases, we cannot have the exactly number, because if there is a quilombola living in the city, they are not counted as quilombola. If there is an indigenous studying at the university and didn't come back to his community because of the pandemic, he's not counted as an indigenous. So here in Brazil, we are organizing like lots of organizations that are based on the front lines to bring these numbers up. But if we had like the full support of international organizations that rely on these informations and rely on the associations that are based in the front lines, of course, we will be spreading like proper information and not relying on numbers that don't say the real truth in the basis.
Felix, do you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, well, I just want to maybe add another aspect to what has already been said. I think what's a big problem is there seems to be, at least from what I've seen, there's this growing mistrust in institutions and the information that they convey. I mean, even just like a few weeks ago in Trafalgar Square in London, there was a big demonstration just saying it's all a hoax, and it's terribly dangerous, this mistrust in science and this mistrust in facts, and it's actively putting people's lives in danger. So we definitely have to work on communicating the facts to the population and get rid of misinformation on social media. Social media is, like, as you all know, a big source of misinformation. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a way on running for the responsibility on addressing what is needed.
Absolutely. I would like to, at this point, welcome our many viewers who are watching through the United Nations and Dear World Live handles. I'd like to welcome Jose Sumit, Yesa Mangi. There's lots of other people, Lonesome Sense, Adi Guzel Masli as well. You're all welcome. Remember to send in your comments and questions about everything you're hearing. I want to know from you, first of all, where are you tuning in from? You are welcome. And secondly, has the pandemic done anything to affect any advocacy, any activism that you're doing, and how are you able to combat that? So send me your thoughts and questions as you're watching us live. Now, here at Doha Debates, we try not to settle for a divided world. We actively work against it, and we try to come together to form consensus wherever possible. So let's reflect a little bit now on our discussion about the pandemic and the global response to it. And for the next few minutes, I want to focus on what people can do in practical terms to help us respond better as a global community to the future. So let me get all of my guests up where you all are. Okay, the question that I really want to ask from you is, what practical things can people do to renew support for global cooperation? Like, what can we all do as individuals? Paloma, let me come to you first, because Brazil is the second most hard-hit country when it comes to the coronavirus, almost on par with India now, in fact. So what can people do in this age to make sure that the things that they believe in are fought for, their voices heard?
Of course, by uniting ourselves, we have like a strong voice. We made recently so many strengths with youth activists based in Europe to tag the UN Mercosur agreement on our views. This was super important to us because as we are facing what we have to face on the grounds, they can help us spreading our messages in other space that we cannot reach because of lots of stuff. Since connections or being in presence. And not only that, like I think we got to information and we need to support who is providing like proper information and information for what they really are doing. Like we have to follow like youth pages, indigenous pages to see what we are doing, what we are needing, to support what we are saying, because it is in these networks that we say what is needed, how you can support. We have so many right now, like funds for the Amazon, for the communities here.
Right.
But no one knows what exactly is. So just come to our pages. We explain like everything and we show our views in there. Please follow us and listen to what we have to say.
Paloma there, getting a pitch in. I like it. Working very hard. I'd like to throw that open to the rest of my guests. Practical advice that youth activists and advocates around the world should take on board.
Yeah, so firstly, I don't think that you need to be necessarily like a young person to do some of these things. I just think you just have to be like an active citizen. And part of that, I think for me, includes things of understanding that, yes, the internet is a deeply powerful thing, but some of us live with our grandparents, we live with our mothers, being able to translate whatever news that we pick up on the thing, either via social media or via the news in a language that they can understand is something that we can definitely do. Ensure that whatever it is that we learn, we can take it to the ground, because not everyone has access to the internet. And another one is, for me, really a lot of problems are deeply political and they are deeply entrenched in systems. So if you're not happy about how a particular institution is functioning, if you're not happy with how your Congress is functioning, if you're not happy with how your local municipality is functioning, engage. And part of engaging is not just voting. Sometimes might mean that you spread electoral education, means that you yourself even vie if you think that you're capable to serve your community in a way that they've not been served before. But for me, everything is deeply political.
Became that really actually making a salient point that everything is political, but I still want to find something that is not so political. So Felix, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to try and see if you can agree with your colleagues there. Do you think that this has to be done on a molecular level and we should stop worrying about big changes that may or may not occur? What do you think?
No, I definitely, I mean, this is a global problem and a global problem needs a global solution, but every global solution starts on the local level. So definitely having this molecular aspect of it is where it all starts from. It starts with local activists on the ground, and that also brings me to what Paloma said, is bring your voices together. when you gather youth voices, it becomes so much louder. At some point, people will have to listen to you. But I also definitely do agree that I think all of these issues are deeply, deeply political. And sadly, the solution isn't just, oh, we do this or we change this, we do this differently. That's sadly not how it is. We need system-wide transformative change to move away from a system of decades of colonialism and exploitation of nature and of the poor, and then move towards a system that actually promotes nature. It promotes equality and justice and fairness.
I am being told that you three wonderful people have taken all the time that we have allotted. I am so thankful to you all, because I think so much of what you said is encouraging, that we have to take it one step at a time. We have to do it one task at a time and one person at a time. So thank you all. My guests today on this very special episode of Dear World Life have been Paloma Costa Oliveira. She's a young climate activist from Brazil. Obikeng Lesayani, a South African education activist, politics fellow and youth activist, and Felix Feider, a conservationist and environmental activist from Luxembourg. Wave goodbye, everybody. That was excellent. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Vote. America, vote. America.
There's a party political message there from Obikeng. Thank you, guys. Take care. That's just how we roll at Dear World Live. Thank you very much. That's all from our very special edition. Thank you for watching us, joining us, all of you online as ever. That is all from this show, but we have so much more coming to you from the Youth Plenary. If you want to join us, please hop on over to event.un.org, where we will have the rest of the UN 75 Youth Plenary. That's all from me. Up next, we have a young artist, Zuhaira Singenge. She is also known as the African Lioness, and she is an international poet, writer, and storyteller based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. She will be sharing her poem, The Glass Room, which speaks about connecting in this time of disconnection.